The first time my son called a stranger, "Dad," the entire bakery went so quiet I could hear the coffee dripping into the pot behind me. It was a Tuesday morning in Maple Hollow, the kind of early winter morning where frost clung to the windows like lace and the whole town smelled faintly of wood smoke, cinnamon, and wet pavement. I had been awake since 4:30 a.m., kneading dough in the back kitchen while Noah and Oliver slept curled together on the old couch in my office, their matching dinosaur blankets tangled around their legs. By 7, the little hearth was warm, golden, and crowded with the usual rush of teachers, nurses, construction workers, and retirees who came in for blueberry muffins before the day began. I was behind the counter, dusting powdered sugar over a tray of lemon scones, when the bell above the door rang once. I did not have to look up to know it was him. Carter Blake always arrived at exactly 7. Black coffee. No sugar. No cream. A navy wool coat that probably cost more than my oven. Polished shoes that never seemed to carry mud from the sidewalk. A quiet voice, a silver watch, and an alpha presence so controlled it made the air around him feel colder. He had been coming in for 3 weeks, ever since Blake Industries opened a temporary office 20 miles outside town, and every morning I told myself the same lie. He did not remember me. He could not remember me. To him, I was just Evan Miller, the Omega baker with tired green eyes and flour on his sleeves. Not the young server from a glittering corporate gala 5 years ago. Not the person who had disappeared before dawn with a shaking heart and a secret growing inside him. Not the person who had carried his children alone. "Morning," Carter said, his voice low and even, like distant thunder softened by snow. My fingers tightened around the paper cup. "Morning, Mr. Blake." "The usual." "Please." He looked at me for half a second longer than necessary, the way he sometimes did, as if there was a word sitting on the edge of his memory that he could not quite say. I turned away before my face betrayed me. That was when Oliver came running from the back room, one sneaker untied, curls wild. From sleep, clutching the small blue truck Carter had picked up for him yesterday after he dropped it under a table. Noah followed more slowly, serious as always, his gray eyes still heavy with dreams. Those eyes were the reason I rarely let him stand too close to Carter. They were the same impossible silver gray, the same winter sky shade that had haunted me for 5 years. Oliver skidded to a stop at the counter, looked up at Carter with complete, fearless certainty, and smiled. "Dad, you came back." The cup slipped from my hand and hit the floor, black coffee spreading across the tile like a shadow. Carter did not move. Noah went pale. Every customer turned toward us. Oliver blinked, realizing too late that he had said something he was not supposed to say, but the word was already there, hanging between us, soft and devastating. "Dad." Carter slowly lowered his gaze to Oliver, then to Noah, then finally to me. For the first time since he had walked back into my life, the cold CEO mask cracked. His eyes searched my face with a stunned, aching focus, and beneath the scent of roasted coffee and warm bread, I caught the sharp, familiar trace of cedarwood and frost. My past had found my children. And my children had just called it home. Before Maple Hollow, before the smell of cinnamon rolls and coffee beans became the center of my world, I was just another invisible Omega in a white catering jacket, carrying champagne through a ballroom where nobody knew my name. Blake Industries held its annual winter gala at the Harrington Hotel in downtown Chicago, 40 stories above the frozen river, with crystal chandeliers glittering overhead and floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting a city that looked too bright to be real. I was 22, broke, exhausted, and trying very hard not to stare at the people who moved through that room like they owned the air itself. Alphas in tailored suits spoke about mergers, senators, and private islands. Omegas in designer silk laughed behind jeweled hands. Betas with earpieces guided guests from one polished corner to another. I kept my eyes down, refilled glasses, collected empty plates, and reminded myself that I was being paid. $26 an hour plus tips, which meant I could cover rent and maybe buy a used crib for my cousin's baby shower. I had no business noticing Carter Blake. Everyone noticed him anyway. He stood near the center of the ballroom, tall and perfectly still, surrounded by board members twice his age who watched him with careful respect. He was only 30, but the room bent around him as if he had been born holding a crown instead of a pen. His black suit was simple, his expression unreadable, and his silver-gray eyes made people straighten their backs before he even spoke. The scent around him was not loud or careless like the other alphas in the room. It was controlled, cold, and precise, cedarwood beneath fresh frost, expensive leather beneath winter air. It reached me from across the ballroom and made my breath catch in a way I could not explain. He looked untouchable. He also looked lonely. That was the part one could not stop seeing. Whenever someone laughed too loudly beside him, his mouth gave the correct polite curve, but his eyes remained distant. Whenever his mother, Helena Blake, touched his arm and guided him toward another donor, his shoulders tightened by the smallest inch. People praised him, feared him, needed him, but no one seemed to ask whether he was tired. Later that night, after midnight, I found him on a quiet balcony with the city wind pulling at his dark hair and a glass of untouched whiskey resting near his hand. I had gone out there to gather empty flutes, but I froze when he spoke without turning around. "You have been working for 6 hours without sitting down." My face burned. "I am sorry, sir. I did not mean to interrupt." He turned then, and for the first time, Carter Blake looked directly at me, not through me, not past me, but at me. That was not a complaint. I should have left. Instead, I stood there with a silver tray pressed against my chest while snow began to drift beyond the balcony glass. He asked my name. I told him. Evan. He repeated it once, quietly, as if testing the shape of it. For a few minutes, he was not the cold alpha CEO everyone whispered about, and I was not the invisible Omega hired to clear plates. We were just two strangers standing above Chicago, both pretending we were not lonely, both failing. And when his eyes softened, I made the first mistake of my life. I believed that a man like Carter Blake could remember someone like me. That night became a memory I spent years trying to hold and escape at the same time. Nothing about it felt like the dangerous fairy tales people told about powerful alphas and foolish omegas. It was quieter than that, sadder than that, and somehow more impossible to forget. Carter did not make promises beneath the snow, and I did not ask for them. We simply stayed on that balcony long after the gala music softened behind the glass, talking about ordinary things that felt strangely sacred because no one had ever asked us before. He asked if I liked Chicago. I told him I liked the lights but hated how small they made me feel. I asked if he enjoyed running Blake Industries. He looked down at the river, black and silver beneath the bridges, and said, "Enjoy is not a word my family uses." There was a loneliness in that answer so sharp it made my chest ache. By the time the hotel staff began clearing the ballroom, the world beyond that balcony felt far away, like something happening to other people. I remembered his coat around my shoulders when the wind picked up. I remembered the warmth of his hand when he steadied me on the icy floor near the terrace door. I remembered thinking that for one impossible night, Carter Blake did not look at me like a server, an omega, or a mistake waiting to happen. He looked at me like I was real. Morning came too quickly. Pale winter light slipped through the hotel curtains, turning the room soft and gray. Carter was asleep in a chair near the window, still in his dress shirt, his dark hair slightly messy, his face stripped of its public coldness. He looked younger that way, almost peaceful. I stood there with my shoes in my hand and my heart pounding, knowing I should wake him, knowing I should say something normal, something brave. Then his phone lit up on the table. I did not mean to read it. The screen was facing me, and the message appeared before I could look away. Your mother expects confirmation. About the Ashford engagement before noon. The board will not tolerate another delay. My stomach dropped as if the floor had vanished beneath me. Engagement. Board. Confirmation. Those words rearranged the entire night into something smaller and uglier. I was not a person he could choose. I was a secret that could ruin a negotiation. A soft chime followed, then another message from a name saved only as Helena. Carter, clean this up before it becomes a problem. No distractions. I stared at those words until my eyes burned. Maybe they were not about me. Maybe I was being unfair. But fear is not patient, and shame is not reasonable. I had grown up knowing what happened when Omegas without power reached for lives above them. They were pitted, paid off, or erased from the story. I found a hotel notepad, wrote thank you because anything more would have broken me, and left before he woke. 2 months later, in a tiny clinic on the south side, a nurse handed me a plastic test with 2 bright lines and asked if I had someone to call. I thought of Carter asleep in winter light. I thought of the word engagement glowing on his phone. I pressed one hand over my trembling mouth and said no. The nurse at the clinic tried to be kind, but kindness felt almost worse than fear. She handed me a paper cup of water, lowered her voice, and explained my options with the careful gentleness people use when they can see that someone is one sentence away from falling apart. I sat on the edge of the exam table with the paper crinkling beneath me, one hand pressed to my stomach even though there was nothing to feel yet, only the impossible knowledge that my life had divided into before and after. A week later, the first ultrasound changed everything again. The room was dim, the monitor flickering blue and white, and the technician moved the wand across my stomach with a small, focused frown. I thought something was wrong because she went quiet for too long. My heart climbed into my throat. Then she smiled, turned the screen toward me, and said, "There are 2 heartbeats." 2. The word did not fit inside my body. 2 tiny, flickering signs of life. 2 futures. 2 reasons I could never afford to be careless again. I cried so hard the technician had to give me extra tissues, and for one brief, terrifying second, I almost called Carter. I even typed his name into a search bar that night, sitting on the floor of my apartment with my back against the bed and a stack of unpaid bills beside me. His face appeared in a business article beside Helena Blake and a smiling Omega from the Ashford family, both dressed for some charity dinner in New York. The caption said negotiations between the 2 families were expected to strengthen Blake Industries for the next decade. I closed the laptop before I could read more. The next morning, a woman in a gray suit waited outside my apartment building. She knew my name, my job, the hotel where I had worked, and the exact date of the gala. She did not raise her voice. She did not threaten me in any way that could be repeated clearly. She only handed me an envelope thick with documents and said, "Mr. Blake has a future that cannot include complications." I remember staring at her polished shoes because looking at her face made me feel small. "Did Carter send you?" I asked. Her expression did not change. "Mr. Blake has people who protect his interests." Inside the envelope was a cashier's check for more money than I had ever seen and a non-disclosure agreement with my name already typed across the top. I should have been angry. Instead, I was cold. So cold I could barely hold the papers. I did not sign. I packed. By sunset, everything I owned fit into 2 duffel bags and a cardboard box. I sold my phone, bought a prepaid one with cash, and boarded a bus heading north with no real plan except distance. Maple Hollow was supposed to be a stop, just a quiet Michigan town with cheap rent, a clinic, and a bakery owner willing to hire a pregnant Omega who asked no questions. But winter turned into spring, and fear slowly became routine. I learned to bake before dawn. I learned which prenatal vitamins I could afford. I learned to sleep sitting up when my back hurt too much to lie down. And when Noah and Oliver arrived on a rainy August night, 6 pounds and 5 pounds, both screaming like they had already decided the world belonged to them, I understood that running had not been cowardice. It had been the first brave thing I ever did. 5 years taught me that peace was not something given to people like me. It was something built before sunrise, one careful habit at a time. By the time Noah and Oliver turned 5, the little hearth had become more than a bakery. It was our shelter, our schedule, and the proof that I could make a life out of almost nothing. Every morning, I unlocked the front door at 5:15, turned on the ovens, and let the first wave of heat roll across my face while the boys slept in my office under their dinosaur blankets. Maple Hollow woke slowly outside the windows, with pickup trucks crunching over salted streets, school buses groaning at the corners, and the old church bell marking each hour from 3 blocks away. I knew every customer by order and mood. Mrs. Callahan wanted a bran muffin and gossip. Deputy Harris wanted 2 glazed donuts and pretended one was for someone else. The teachers from Maple Hollow Elementary came in laughing, still half asleep, smelling like dry erase markers and winter coats. It was ordinary. It was safe. And for a while, I believed ordinary could protect us. Then Carter Blake walked through my door. It happened on a Monday morning in January, 3 weeks before Oliver called him Dad in front of half the town. The bell above the door gave its usual bright ring, and I looked up with a customer service smile already on my face. The smile vanished before I could stop it. He stood just inside the entrance, bringing the cold in with him, tall and broad-shouldered in a charcoal overcoat dusted with snow. 5 years had sharpened him. His hair was still black, his face still calm in that carved, unreadable way, but there were faint shadows beneath his eyes that had not been there before. He looked richer, colder, and somehow more tired than the man I remembered from Chicago. The scent reached me next, cutting through yeast, butter, coffee, and sugar like a winter wind through an open door. Cedarwood. Frost. Expensive leather. My hands went numb around the pastry tongs. For one wild second, I thought he had found me. I thought the gray-suited woman had finally returned with lawyers, paperwork, and the full weight of the Blake name behind her. But Carter only glanced at the chalkboard menu, then at me, with polite unfamiliarity. "Black coffee, please," he said. No recognition. No anger. No accusation. Just a stranger placing an order. I turned toward the coffee station before my knees could give out. Small, medium, or large? Medium. His voice had not changed. It still landed somewhere deep in my chest, in the part of me that remembered snow above Chicago and pale morning light through hotel curtains. I filled the cup too full, burning my thumb when the lid snapped crookedly. Carter noticed. His hand moved slightly, as if he meant to reach across the counter, then stopped. "Are you all right?" he asked. I almost laughed. Instead, I nodded. "Just tired." "Long morning?" "Long 5 years," I said before I could swallow the words. His eyes lifted to mine. For a heartbeat, the bakery seemed to tilt. Something flickered across his face, not recognition exactly, but disturbance, like a locked room inside him had heard a sound from behind the door. Then Oliver sneezed in the office, and Noah whispered loudly that he should use a tissue. Carter turned his head toward the sound. I stepped sideways, blocking his view. "Your total is $3.25. He paid with a black card, left a $10 bill in the tip jar, and walked out into the snow. I stood there long after the door closed, watching his footprints fade on the sidewalk. The next morning, he came back at 7. The morning after that, he came again. Always black coffee. Always quiet. Always looking at me as if he could not understand why the warmth of my little bakery made him look so lost. Children notice what adults are desperate to hide. I learned that during Carter Blake's 3rd week in Maple Hollow, when Noah began watching him with the quiet intensity of a 5-year-old who had found a puzzle piece under the couch and knew it belonged somewhere important. Noah was my careful child, the one who lined up his crayons by color and asked why the moon followed our truck home from the grocery store. Oliver was all motion and sunshine, a blur of untied shoes, sticky fingers, and questions that arrived faster than I could answer them. I had spent their whole lives telling myself they were mine alone, but Carter's presence made that lie harder to breathe around. The boys did not know his name at first. To them, he was the tall man who came in every morning for black coffee, the man who always said please, the man who looked serious but never complained when Oliver pressed his face against the pastry case and fogged up the glass. Then one morning, Carter found Oliver's blue toy truck beneath table 4 and placed it on the counter with the same careful focus he might have used to sign $1 million contract. "I believe this belongs to someone," he said. Oliver gasped as if Carter had returned a lost treasure from the ocean floor. "You found Thunder Truck." Carter's mouth softened by the smallest degree. "Thunder Truck is a strong name." "He is brave," Oliver said proudly. "He drives through storms." Carter looked at him for a second too long. "That sounds useful." From that day on, Oliver trusted him completely. Noah took longer. He would stand beside the bakery case, small hands clasped behind his back, and study Carter's face while pretending to choose a cookie. One morning, he asked, "Why are your eyes like mine?" My heart stopped so suddenly I nearly dropped a tray of croissants. Carter looked down at Noah, then across the counter at me. "Are they?" Noah nodded, solemn. "Mom says mine look like winter." Carter's gaze changed when he heard that. Not much, not enough for anyone else to notice, but I noticed. I noticed everything about him now because survival had made me an expert in small shifts, quiet dangers, and doors that might need to be locked. "Your mother has a good eye," Carter said at last. Noah frowned. "Evan is my dad." Heat rose to my face. Carter did not correct him. He only nodded, slow and respectful, as if the sentence deserved care. "Then your dad has a good eye." That should have made me feel safer. It did not. Carter kept returning, and the boys kept finding reasons to be near him. When a thunderstorm rolled across town one afternoon, Noah froze near the front window, his hands clamped over his ears. Before I could reach him, Carter crouched several feet away, giving him space. "Count the seconds after the flash," he said gently. "That tells you how far away it is." Noah peeked at him through his fingers. "Really? Really?" Together they counted, 1, 2, 3, 4, until the fear loosened from Noah's shoulders. Later, Oliver climbed onto a chair to reach the jar of cinnamon sticks and nearly tipped sideways. Carter caught the back of the chair before it could wobble, steady and silent, his face suddenly pale. "Feet on the floor," he said, not sharp, only shaken. Oliver obeyed, then grinned up at him. "You sound like Dad." The bakery noise faded for me. Carter turned toward my son with something raw passing through his eyes, something close to wonder and pain. Noah looked at Oliver, then at Carter, then at me. He understood before anyone spoke. Children always do. The next morning, the truth finally slipped into the open. Oliver ran from the office with Thunder Truck in one hand, saw Carter standing by the counter, and smiled with the easy certainty of a heart that had never learned to protect itself. "Dad, you came back." The word landed between us with the weight of 5 stolen years. Oliver was still smiling, too young to understand why every adult in the bakery had gone still, why Deputy Harris stopped with his donut halfway to his mouth, why Mrs. Callahan pressed one hand to her chest as if she had just witnessed the final scene of a movie. Noah understood enough to grab Oliver's sleeve and whisper, "Ollie, do not." Carter did not look away from my sons. His face had lost all its color beneath the sharp lines of control he wore so well. For a moment, he seemed less like the untouchable alpha CEO of Blake Industries and more like a man standing at the edge of a life he had never known was his. I forced myself to move first. "Everyone, I am so sorry," I said, my voice too bright, too thin. "Kids say strange things before breakfast." A few people gave awkward laughs because people are kind in small towns when they know a person is drowning in public. Carter said nothing. He only bent down. Slowly until he was level with Oliver, careful not to crowd him. "Why did you call me that?" he asked, so gently it hurt worse than anger would have. Oliver looked confused now. His lower lip trembled. "Because you came back. Dad's come back." Carter closed his eyes for half a second. When he opened them, they moved to Noah. Noah stood rigid beside the counter, brave and terrified, his silver-gray eyes shining with secrets he had never been asked to keep but had somehow carried anyway. "Noah," Carter said quietly. "How old are you?" I stepped forward. "Do not question my children." Carter stood. The bakery seemed too small around him, but his voice stayed low. "Then you answer me." I looked at the customers, at the boys, at the coffee spreading across the tile from the cup I had dropped. "Not here." Carter's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "I closed the bakery early for the first time in 3 years. Mrs. Callahan took the boys upstairs to our apartment with a promise of cartoons and pancakes, though Noah kept looking back at me over the railing as if he knew I was about to walk into a storm. Downstairs, the bakery felt strange without voices, only the hum of refrigerators and the ticking of the old wall clock. Carter stood near table 4, both hands braced on the back of a chair. "Tell me they are not mine," he said. It was not a command. It was a plea from a man already broken by the answer. I had rehearsed this moment in nightmares, but the real thing stripped every defense from me. "I cannot." His breath left him in a slow, unsteady sound. He looked toward the ceiling, toward the faint patter of the boys' feet above us. 5 years, he whispered. I had sons for 5 years. I was trying to protect them. From me. The pain in his voice almost made me flinch. From your world. I told him everything then, not beautifully, not bravely, but in pieces that shook as they came out. The clinic. The 2 heartbeats. The article about the Ashford engagement. The woman in the gray suit waiting outside my apartment with documents and money and the message that I was a complication. Carter listened without interrupting, but something in him changed with every word. The coldness did not return. Something more dangerous than coldness did, a silent grief sharpened by understanding. My mother, he said at last. I stared at him. You did not send her. No, his voice cracked on the single word. Evan, I woke up and you were gone. I found your note. I searched the hotel records, the catering company, every staff list I could access. There was no Evan Miller. Your agency said you had quit and left no forwarding address. 2 weeks later, the file disappeared from our system. My legs felt weak. But the engagement. There was no engagement. He looked at me then, and the devastation in his eyes was worse than blame. There was pressure. There were negotiations. I ended them before noon that day. The room tilted around me. For 5 years, I had built my fear around a truth that had never been true. Carter looked up again as Oliver laughed softly above us, bright and unaware. I lost their first steps, he said. Their first words. Their birthdays. Their fevers. Their favorite bedtime stories. His hand pressed hard over his mouth for a moment before falling away. I am angry, Evan. But not because you had them. Because someone made you believe you had to run from me. Helena Blake arrived in Maple Hollow 2 days after Carter learned the truth, and somehow the town seemed to dim around her. She did not come alone. 2 black SUVs rolled up to the curb outside the little hearth just after closing, sleek and silent against the slushy street, their tinted windows reflecting the bakery lights like dark mirrors. I was wiping down the counter while Noah and Oliver sat at table 3, coloring paper snowmen for their kindergarten classroom. Carter had come by after work and was kneeling beside them, helping Oliver choose between blue and purple crayons with the same seriousness he used for corporate negotiations. For 48 hours, we had existed inside a fragile pause. Carter had not demanded anything. He had asked. Could he walk the boys to school with me? Could he know what they liked for breakfast? Could he read one bedtime story from the hallway if they were not ready for more? I had said yes to some things and not yet to others. And he had accepted every boundary like it was sacred. That careful peace shattered when the bell above the door rang and Helena Blake stepped inside wearing a cream wool coat, pearl earrings, and the kind of calm that made kindness feel like a costume. I knew her before she said a word. 5 years had not changed the shape of her face from the charity article, or the cold precision of her eyes from the messages that had sent me running. Carter stood so quickly his chair scraped the floor. Mother. Noah looked up at the word. Oliver kept coloring, unaware that the temperature in the room had dropped. Helena's gaze moved from Carter to me, then to the twins. She did not gasp. She did not soften. She studied them the way someone might study property lines. So it is true, she said. My hand tightened around the cleaning cloth. Carter stepped between her and the boys. You should not be here. I disagree. The existence of 2 Blake heirs is a family matter. The word heirs made Noah's crayon pause against the paper. I moved closer to the table. They are children. Helena smiled faintly. Of course. Children with rare alpha bloodlines, significant legal interests, and a future that cannot be managed above a small-town bakery. Carter's voice turned quiet. Choose your next words carefully. She ignored the warning and placed a folder on the counter. Temporary relocation to Chicago would be appropriate. Private physicians. Security. Education planning. A formal paternity confirmation. The board will require discretion, and the family will require structure. My body remembered fear before my mind could argue with it. The gray-suited woman. The envelope. The bus station. The feeling of having no walls strong enough to keep powerful people out. Oliver finally noticed the silence and slid off his chair, clutching Thunder Truck to his chest. Dad? He asked, looking at Carter, and the small word made Helena's mouth tighten. Carter turned to him immediately, his whole expression changing. You are safe, he said. Both of you are safe. Helena exhaled as if patience were a gift she was tired of giving. Emotional displays will not solve this. Carter, you have responsibilities larger than nostalgia. I expected him to answer at once. I needed him to. Instead, he looked at the folder, then at his mother, then at the boys. His silence opened every old wound in me. For one terrible second, I was back in Chicago with a cashier's check in my hand, being told that my children were complications before they had even been born. No, I whispered, stepping in front of Noah and Oliver before I realized I had moved. You do not get to measure them. You do not get to plan them. You do not get to decide they belong somewhere just because their last name could benefit you. Helena's eyes sharpened. Their last name is precisely the issue. Their last name is Miller, I said, my voice shaking but clear. Because I was the one who held them through fevers. I was the one who worked double shifts with a baby monitor beside the flower bins. I was the one who taught them how to share, how to apologize, how to be gentle. You do not get to arrive 5 years late and call that structure. Carter's hand closed over the folder. For a heartbeat, I thought he was going to open it. Instead, he tore it cleanly in half, then again, until the legal pages fell across the counter like dead leaves. Helena went still. Carter's face was pale, but his voice did not waver. There will be no relocation. No board strategy. No family custody arrangement. You took 5 years from me, and you nearly took their father from them twice. You will not take anything else. Helena looked at him as if she were seeing a stranger. You would risk Blake Industries for this? Carter glanced at Noah and Oliver, then at me, and the cold alpha CEO everyone feared disappeared completely. Not for this, he said. For them. By morning, everyone in Maple Hollow knew that Helena Blake had left town without the boys. Small towns do not keep secrets well, but sometimes they keep people better. Mrs. Callahan brought over a casserole large enough to feed 12. Deputy Harris parked across from the bakery for 2 nights and claimed he was only enjoying the coffee. The teachers at Maple Hollow Elementary stopped asking questions and started sending home extra drawings, extra library books, and a note that said Noah and Oliver had many people in their corner. Carter stayed, not as a guest who expected forgiveness, but as a man learning the shape of the life he had missed. He rented the little blue house 3 streets over instead of buying the biggest property near the lake. He came to school pickup with his sleeves rolled up and listened carefully when Oliver explained the complex politics of the kindergarten playground. He learned that Noah hated peas but liked broccoli if it had melted cheddar on top. He learned that bedtime required 2 stories, 1 glass of water, and an inspection for imaginary dragons under the bed. He learned that fatherhood was not a title he could claim in a boardroom. It was hundreds of small promises kept when no one was watching. I learned too. I learned that trust did not return all at once, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. It came slowly, in ordinary moments. Carter replacing the loose hinge on the bakery's back door without announcing it. Carter asking before touching my shoulder. Carter sitting on the floor for an hour while Noah taught him how to build a block tower exactly 24 inches tall. Carter standing in my kitchen with flour on his black sweater while Oliver laughed so hard he fell off a step stool into my arms. 2 months later, he held a press conference in Chicago. I watched it from the bakery laptop after closing, with the boys asleep upstairs and my hands wrapped around a mug of tea gone cold. Carter stood before a wall of cameras and said Blake Industries would no longer be governed by private family arrangements or legacy contracts. He stepped down from the parts of the company Helena controlled, kept the work that mattered to him, and made it clear that his sons were not bargaining chips, heirs for display, or assets for anyone to manage. He did not name me until a reporter asked whether the Omega father of his children had agreed to the announcement. Carter looked straight into the cameras and said, "Evan Miller protected our sons when I could not. Any future I have with them begins with respecting him." I cried then, quietly, not because everything was fixed, but because something had finally been named correctly. Spring came early that year. The snow melted from the sidewalks, the lake turned blue again, and the little hearth smelled like strawberry hand pies and lemon glaze. One Saturday morning, Carter arrived late, carrying a crooked bouquet from the farmer's market and wearing jeans instead of a suit. Noah and Oliver were drawing at table 3. Oliver looked up first. "Dad, you are late." Carter smiled, the kind of smile I had once thought impossible on his face. "I know. I brought flowers as an apology." Noah inspected them seriously. "Dad, Evan likes daisies." Carter looked at me across the warm, noisy bakery. "I remember. That was the miracle, in the end. Not that Carter Blake found us. Not that my sons gained the father they had always sensed was missing. The miracle was that remembering no longer hurt. It became something we could build with. A school picture on the refrigerator. For mugs by the sink. Tiny boots beside expensive shoes at the door. A life where no one had to run before sunrise. That evening, after the boys fell asleep on the couch between us, Carter reached for my hand slowly, giving me time to pull away. I did not. Outside, Maple Hollow settled under a violet sky, and the bakery windows glowed gold against the dark. For 5 years, I had believed home was the place I hid from the past. But as Carter laced his fingers through mine and our sons breathed softly beside us, I finally understood. Home was not where the running ended. Home was where someone stayed.